Hi guys, Olive here today to bring you the second episode in my brand new series all about the 1990s PBS Kids TV show Wishbone. It was a show that highlighted and incorporated well-known works of literature into an ongoing storyline about a spunky Jack Russell Terrier, his teenage owner Joe, and their group of friends in their Texas town. So in each video in this series, I break down one episode of the TV show. I look at what work of literature it chooses to highlight, and I talk about what moral messages are being communicated to the very young audience. So let's hit it. What's the story, Wishbone? What's the story, Wishbone? In this second video, we will be discussing an episode from season 2, Groomed for Greatness, that takes on one of Charles Dickens' classics, 1861's Great Expectations. The episode starts off with the real characters, a well-known artist connected to one of our side characters. Her name is Wanda. She's also an artist and is a friend of Wishbone's family. Her cousin comes into town wearing something entirely unseasonable for the Texas climate. But she's not just in town to grace everyone with her presence. She's actually planning on creating a sculpture to commemorate a heroic dog that serves as the namesake for the local community park. But since this dog's act of heroism occurred 150 years prior to the events of this episode, I'm assuming they didn't know what that dog actually looked like. So instead, they're going to choose a local dog to serve as the model for the sculpture. And wouldn't you know it, Wishbone is the lucky pup. But before we see that project get started, we are transported into Great Expectations, where we start with the pivotal scene where the escaped convict approaches Pip, played by Wishbone, of course, asking him for help. Bouncing back to the sculpture storyline, the teens begin to become enamored with the famous artist's lifestyle and all of her fancy possessions. David, a friend of Wishbone's teenage owner Joe, becomes the de facto assistant to this fancy schmancy artist, who we get the real sense is not into this project. The ties between these two storylines really starts to become clear when Pip starts to visit Miss Havisham and Estella on a regular basis. That introduction to Sada's house really delivers the atmosphere, by the way. But then Pip finds out that he is going to be made a gentleman by an unknown benefactor. And if you've read the book, he believes that Miss Havisham is behind this. He excitedly leaves behind his loyal and true friend, who is also his brother-in-law and guardian, Joe, to go off to his new life. But he quickly gets a big head and starts spending beyond his means. And he's not the only one who thinks a bit too much of himself. Texas teen David, newly initiated into the art world, is becoming quite self-important in his new beret. But David and Pip are both in for some rude awakenings. Pip learns the truth about the reversal in his fortunes right around the time that we find out that this artist has skipped town before even beginning the sculpture, leaving a pile of debts in her wake. Both characters realize how badly they had treated their friends, and they both go home again, so to speak. And that's really the main message that this episode chooses to highlight, those pulls of wealth and status that once you get a taste of them, can make you forget where you came from. We start off feeling less than worthy in the face of people who have more of what we want. But be careful what you wish for, because if you get those things and start leaning into the superficiality of everything, you might not recognize yourself in the end. And also, that high life is a lot more illusory than you would think. It's a really good message, and it's a very memorable one from the book. I studied this book in school, and I can't for the life of me remember if we touched upon this aspect when we were studying it. I sure hope we did, because I think it's a really good message for teens. All of us, when we're young and we're looking forward at our lives, have all of these grandiose expectations for ourselves. I was really surprised that this episode showed some pretty dark things. Miss Havisham's dress catching on fire, the death of Pip's benefactor. All the characters are aged appropriately with makeup to mark the passage of time. It betrays a confidence in the audience that the Wishbone staff obviously had. They trusted viewers to be able to take on those challenging themes. I really like when kids shows do that, show some of the harder realities of life, albeit with a gentler hand. Most noticeably absent from this episode, though, is Pip's sister, his hot-tempered co-guardian. But I totally understand why she was left out. To include her would be to introduce a lot more of the inner turmoil that Pip faces throughout the book than the show had the time or the freedom to display. Let's just say that he hates himself a lot more in the book. Overall, I thought it was a great interpretation of the classic. Per usual, the real-life storyline felt a little forced, But it always does, since they're bending these characters around a work of classical literature. It's always a little bit strange, but they do always make it work. So that's it for the second episode of What's the Story Wishbone. If you have any comments or questions about anything you've seen in this video or about anything in general, please feel free to put that in the comment section down below. But if you'd like to speak to me somewhere other than YouTube, I am on a variety of different places on social media. The links to all of my profiles are in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.
Funding for Wishbone provided by annual financial support from PBS viewers like you.